Hi and welcome to my coding channel. My name is Anton, and in this video we continue talking about the convention about structuring React applications. In the previous video of this video series we were talking about modules and components. If you didn't watch this video, you should definitely check out that one before proceeding with this one, where we will be talking about interfaces and fixtures. The starter code for this video, for this tutorial, is as always in the public repository. The link to the starter code as well as to the finished code you can also find in the video description. So now let's switch to our application. I have started this application in advance for you, so we can just see where we have stopped. Here we can see that we are already rendering some to-do items, but this is just a crude markup with no data payload. Instead, we want to display here some meaningful list of to-do items for us to track our progress. This already means that our application is going to start working with data. And the first step for that is to define this data structure. And we will do this with interfaces. It means that we are going to create another conventional folder of a module which is called interfaces. And under this folder we will create our new interface file for a to-do item. The first thing, we are going to define the default export of our interface itself, and its naming convention will be the same as for the components. Now, before proceeding, I will say that if you watched my previous video about the modules and components, you will notice that there have already been a component with a similar name to the item. It wasn't a good idea for my part to name it like that. That's why I have renamed this component to to-do card. So this way we will eliminate the ambiguity between names of our interface and component. Well, alright, now let's get back to our to-do item interface. Each to-do, as we can see, has its label. So let's define this property, label. It will be string, and it states whether it is completed or not. So let's mark is done, and this will be boolean. Now, when we have defined our first interface, we are ready to apply it into our component. Now, here is our list of the to-dos, and as we can see, we are just hard coding our cards under the list. Instead, we want to render some meaningful list of things we want to do. So for this, let's just for now to define it right here in the main component file. Let's declare a variable which will be called to-do items with format of to-do item array, and start to define some dummy to-dos that will have their label and their state. There will be some of them. Well, since we are working with the todo application, let's mark those to-dos as steps for us to accomplish our software product. First thing, we would want to display the to-dos. Next logical step would be to toggle their state. The next thing goes by complexity is to delete to-dos. And finally, we would want a feature of creating new to-dos. Alright, so as you can see here, these to-dos have a somewhat already complex structure, but right away, we can at least display its correct quantity. For this, I would suggest to define another variable, internal component variable, to-dos that we now will temporarily assign the to-do items array here. And right now we can just display them right here in our JSX in the standard way. Here we can just use our card, and as we can see now, the quantity is correct. The only thing is that we missed the key property that React requires for array renderings. Here we will just reuse the index parameter from the map function. Now everything is fine, so we would want to make our next commit now, but before doing that I would say some words about this data. Of course, it is still a dummy hard-coded data, but it has already the shape of a data that our client application will be receiving from a server in the future. And even after this functionality, I mean receiving from the server, is done, this data would still be useful for us, for example, for testing, manual as well as automatic. So this is actually a data fixture that we would want to preserve. And for this, we will create another conventional folder under our module that is called just fixtures. And to define our first fixture file, we will call it items in plural. We can reuse this array. Now we would want to import our missing interface. We will just explicitly name this as a fixture. And finally, export this fixture as default. So it would be better for us to reuse this fixture itself here, right here in the component, and it means that we don't need this anymore, as well as the interface import for now. Alright, so everything still works fine. I will just make another tweak here. Since we are working on this first display to the step, we will put it as done in advance for us. Alright, so now we are ready to make our first commit. Okay, so although our quantity of to-dos is rendered correctly, but we still don't see its content here in each to-do card. So let's make it renderable. In our card component, we will want to declare some parameters that this component will eventually receive. In case of this particular component, it would be relatively easy because the interface of its parameters is already defined. It is to-do item. We would want to use both of the fields of the interface, meaning label and done. So we will put a label right here, and the done thing we will display temporarily as a default checked property of the checkbox. Yeah, of course. Now this todo card is requiring a parameter, and in this case we can very conveniently pass it there this way. Alright, so everything is working fine, including the initial state. Of course, this state doesn't really change, doesn't really record itself, but it at least preserves its initial state. So since now we are ready to make the next commit. And that is it about the interfaces and fixtures part about React application structure and convention. If you have any questions or suggestions, write them in comments. If you like this tutorial, hit that like button, and also you would want to subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss the next videos of this React abstraction video series, and not only them. My name is Anton. Don't stop coding, don't stop growing.